Good morning. Why industrial outdoor storage, or IOS, keeps winning. Industrial outdoor storage, or IOS, has quietly become one of the most resilient and in demand asset classes in commercial real estate. Once viewed as a niche strategy, IOS is now attracting institutional capital, private equity, and experienced developers, especially in logistics heavy markets like Houston. And the reason is simple: it's low capital intensity, there's zoning scarcity, there's durable tenant demand, and improving lender appetite combined to create outside risk adjusted returns. So, what is industrial outdoor storage, or IOS? Well, industrial outdoor storage properties are typically fenced, secured, and improved land sites used for vehicle fleets, equipment yards, construction materials, pipe storage, container storage, or last mile logistics staging. And unlike traditional warehouses, IOS sites rely more on land utility than vertical improvements, making them capital efficient and operationally flexible. So there's low capex, which means stronger cash on cash returns on your investment. And one of IOS's biggest advantages is its minimal improvement costs. So here's some typical improvements that you'd see in IOS properties: but fencing and gated access, stabilized or crushed concrete surfaces, lighting and drainage, and typically a small office or a maintenance structure. And this keeps upfront costs low while allowing rents to scale quickly with demand. And in many cases, investors achieve strong yield without new construction risk. Two is zoning scarcity creates pricing power. So municipalities across Texas, and especially in Houston, are becoming more restrictive with outdoor storage zoning. And as residential growth expands and cities push for higher density development, existing IOS zone land is becoming increasingly scarce. And scarcity favors owners because there's limited new supply. There's also long term tenant stickiness. And there's going to be upward pressure on rents as a result of the low supply. So, this zoning friction is a key reason that IOS assets continue to outperform. Three is Houston's logistic engines favor IOS, and Houston's positioning as a port, a rail, and a trucking hub makes it a natural home for IOS demand. And that's partly because of the proximity to the Port of Houston, but also I 10, I 45, Beltway 8, and the Grand Parkway, but also heavy concentration in energy, construction, and infrastructure projects. And that creates consistent demand from contractors, logistics operators, energy service firms, and fleet based businesses. So IOS isn't speculative, it supports the physical movement of the economy. The four is lender appetite is expanding. And historically, IOS lending was limited, and that's slowly changing. And today, more lenders are underwriting IOS based on their in place cash flow, the long term tenant use, and they're also paying particular attention to the land value support numbers. But there's also lower operating expenses, and debt is becoming more competitive, particularly for stabilized sites with strong tenancy, making IOS increasingly accessible to professional investors. Number five is institutional capital is taking notice. So there are private equity groups and REITs that are now aggregating IOS portfolios at scale. And why, would you ask? Because they have predictable operating costs, because they have strong tenant retention, and it's an inflation resistant rent growth target. And also, there's a strategic land optionality as an exit. But when institutional capital moves into a niche, it validates the long term thesis. So, why does IOS keep winning? Well, industrial outdoor storage works because it aligns with today's market realities. And the first being capital discipline, but also operational simplicity. And there's supply constraints, and it's infrastructure driven demand. So, for investors seeking durable income with development upside and less exposure to traditional CRE volatility, IOS continues to check the right boxes. Now, if you want to understand where industrial capital is actually flowing in Houston, iOS deserves a serious look. And that is it for the day. Please visit my website, Houston Real Estate Brokerage, to figure out how to get a hold of me. And I'd love to talk more with you about your scenario. Have a good day.